We're here today at the Boston Herald, in front of the Boston Herald on May 18th, 2017, at the hanging rally. On May 8th, the Boston Herald published an editorial stating that people who advocate for informed consent should be subject to a hanging offense. I have here with us Mark Blaxill.
Blaxill. B-L-A-X.
Yes. From Mass Health Choice.
Health Choice, yeah.
Yes. And Mark went to Minnesota, and he visited with Somali immigrants. Tell us what happened.
There is a group in Minnesota called the Vaccine Safety Council of Minnesota. They've been engaged. They share in common that many of the children of the members of that group and the Somali community have autism, and so those groups have come together at multiple occasions over the years. And there has been a recent measles outbreak among the Somali community in Minnesota, and as one consequence of that, the health department of Minnesota has been working very hard to try to persuade Somali Americans, many of whom have exercised their philosophical exemption right to not vaccinate. But there's been attempts to vaccinate people in the Somali community. And some in the Somali community are concerned that those attempts are aggressive, in some ways bullying, not in all cases, but there was a request to the Vaccine Safety Council of Minnesota to present information, to hold a forum, so that Somali community residents in Minneapolis and the area could hear from the other side of the issue. And so the Vaccine Safety Council of Minnesota organized this event. They asked me to come speak. I actually live here in Boston. And I gave a presentation, and then we had a panel with some Somali parents and a question and answer period after.
Right. So just to be clear, they invited you.
Yes.
Right. So
they invited the Vaccine Safety Council. The Vaccine Safety Council invited me.
I see. So what happened at the conference?
It was interesting. First of all, the original venue, at the last minute, they bailed out on hosting. There was some concern that maybe the Department of Health had exercised influence on the conference center to cancel our booking. So at the last minute, we had to rebook the location, and we met at there was a restaurant with a little conference area in the Somali community. It was reasonably well attended. We lost some people we know because people showed up at the old place and didn't know where to go. There were, upwards of 100 people at the information session. Some of them Somali, some of them actually dissidents, people who wanted to oppose us, and then some press. And I was the main speaker. I gave a talk on facts. People kept asking me, did I have a message? And my answer is no. I just wanted to share information, and I wanted to let the Somali community, the Somali American community, know that they have a legal right to exemption under the laws of the state of Minnesota. And I shared data, factual data on the risk of measles, the way that's changed historically, the record of mortality, both historically and recently, mortality from the vaccine, and there are some facts. The measles, support of honk there. Measles does have risks, and the vaccine has risks, and so I was sharing factual information on that. And then we also talked about autism in the Somali community, and there was a study done in 2013 on the prevalence of autism in Somali Americans in the Minneapolis area. That rate, as reported, was the highest ever reported in the United States, 1 in 32. may know that the numbers 1 in 68 are sort of the standard numbers that the
Right.
CDC has come out with, and the university followed the same methodology as the CDC. So it was 3.6%, no 3%, 3.0% actually was the rate among the Somali Americans, and that compares to like 1.5% for the rest of the country. So I shared that information, which is that Somali parents have a rational reason
Yes.
to be concerned
So
about autism.
Were they aware of those rates previously?
I think they, in fact, they're very well educated. We had an educated Somali group there.
Yeah.
One of them actually gave me information that I didn't quite capture accurately in my presentation
Right.
about the catchment area for the prevalence stuff.
I see.
And so they were aware of it, but I think that what they were not as well aware of was how their rate compared with the rest of the country and where it compared with the rest of the CDC surveillance work. So I've done a lot of charts. I'm a chart nerd. I've done a lot of charts on the CDC's prevalence numbers and how those have changed over time in New Jersey, Utah, Maryland, Georgia. There's a number of cities or states that have historical prevalence data, and I put the Somali number on the chart, and it was an outlier way on the high side.
So that study, is that still considered, what is the status of that study? Is it,
Well, I think
has it been
Minnesota.
replicated? Has it?
No. Well, they did two studies on the Somali community. One was of early intervention, and that was back, I think, in 2009, and that didn't have kind of a pure prevalence number. And then they went in again in 2013 to do a more thorough one. The way they spun it was there's no cause for concern. The rate of autism in Somali Americans is not significantly different than the rate of autism in white Minneapolis area residents. And statistically speaking, that's a true statement. There's not a statistically significant difference, but the white autism rate was really, really high. It's higher than any of the CDC numbers. So the Minnesota rate of autism in general is quite high, but the African American non-Somali rates were lower, the Hispanic rates were lower, the Somali rates were extraordinarily high, and a click above the white American rates in Minneapolis. There were concerns. One of the things the Somali attendees mentioned to me is they think the rates of autism in the suburbs, in Somali communities in the suburbs, not in the catchment area for this study. That rate is higher because those are some of the more affluent, educated families, and they're more likely to be going to the doctor.
We got drowned out by a truck here. So
Yeah.
You said that the rate in the affluent areas was
One of the things they said to me, and I don't know this for a fact, but there is a perception among some of the Somali Americans that rate that was reported, the 1 in 32 rate, was in a community where the autism rate is actually relatively low in the Somali community.
I see.
That the true rate in other areas may be higher. I've heard, and again, this is all hearsay, that the number itself is concerning enough, but I've heard arguments that it's difficult to ascertain cases of autism in the Somali community because they tend to be private, they tend not to trust authorities, and so the case counting may be biased down in the Somali community relative to the other populations. But in any event, the rate is very high, and that's about where it's gone. I do think that Minnesota may be in the CDC surveillance network going forward, so that rate, we may get a number from Minnesota that is comparable to the 1 in 68 rate in the future. So that's the status as far as I know it. But the larger point is the Minnesota Department of Health spun a 1 in 32 rate as no cause for concern, which is kind of nuts.
They acknowledged the rate.
They did. They reported the rate. That's their study. They reported a 1 in 32 rate of autism in Somali Americans born in 2002, I think. Children who were born in 2002, and they were 8-year-olds. So that, and they spun that as a cause for no longer being concerned about abnormal rates in the Somali community because it's kind of close to the white rate.
Well, bringing it back down to why we're here at a rally, it sounds like you were invited to Minneapolis.
So we were invited. So, and the thing I shared, measles risk, the rational concern over autism risk, and the third thing I shared in terms of information was the Thompson experience. That there is evidence, there is a confession of fraud by a CDC scientist that in fact the CDC suppressed evidence of elevated autism risk, especially among African Americans, in a paper that they published in 2004.
Okay, but you had a conference.
Yeah.
People asked questions. You had some.
I shared facts.
You shared facts. You
Yes.
had some, probably some questions from dissenters that were.
We did. We had some doctors in the audience
That were challenging you.
They did, although I don't think they challenged me on any facts.
Right. Okay.
I mean, because in fact I shared the facts, and I didn't sugarcoat the risk of measles.
And essentially, you had the conference. You got questions. You left, and
Yeah.
then at some point after that,
It got into the press.
It got into the press, and we started hearing Mark Blaxill and anti-vaxxers are targeting a vulnerable community.
Yeah.
So
we did.
how do you respond to that?
Well, I think there's a real issue that we increasingly have a mob mentality in the American press, and people that we have these ADD, attention span, news cycles, everything's on Twitter and Facebook, and things spread, stories become viral. And this story went viral. They had video. There was a group of local Minnesota press that was there, and in some respects there were some fair stories. There were stories that weren't hostile. I made a point of saying that I'm personally not anti-vaccine. I believe in choice. I believe in freedom. I believe in the right of parents to an exemption. I believe if a parent wants to get some vaccines or follow the CDC schedule, they have that right in America. It's a free country. So we were able to get that message across at some level to some of the press. And then I think there were others of the press that were there more with an agenda. I think there was the Washington Post reporter who was there, who I never spoke to, wrote the most hostile story, called us anti-vaccine, and which in their mind, there are many friends of mine who are anti-vaccine. The press uses it as a pejorative. It's name calling. But that story went out, and that was poorly done and polemical, and from the Washington Post. And that story kind of got picked up by the other mainstream media sources, and I think a bunch of newspapers started reporting on a meeting they never went to. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, the Boston Herald, right here, their editorial page wrote an editorial cagily not naming anybody, but obviously picking up on the fact that we had this meeting and that there is a broader movement that is concerned about vaccine choice. There, some of which is anti-vaccine, but largely many of us concerned about defending exemption rights. So the Herald picked up on that and wrote this editorial in which they said the facts are clear, and they didn't know what facts I presented. Vaccines don't cause autism, measles kills, and lying to vulnerable communities about vaccines and autism should be a hanging offense. Which is that's a wildly inflammatory comment. The Vaccine Safety Council came out with a statement saying, "Whoa, guys, we need civil discourse here. Responsible leaders should actually take the high road and understand when we're getting out of line. This group here is peaceful, they're smart, they're well educated, they're parents, they're thoughtful. We're not crazy people. But the Herald is, literally wants me hanged. I mean, that's the equivalent of what Rochelle Cohen said in that editorial. And I'm kind of stunned. I've lived in Boston for 37 years. And that's my hometown. It's one of my hometown newspapers, and they want me hanged. I think that's kind of crazy.
Well, actually, let's focus in on that, because when you say, when she says, Ms. Cohen, that it ought to be a hanging offense, what does that mean? Does that mean that they ought to bring back capital punishment to Massachusetts? Is she actually calling for vigilante justice?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is a mob mentality, and this is, almost quite literally, and obviously it's metaphorical. I think you can clearly understand the intention of someone. I don't think she's going to carry a torch to my apartment in Cambridge, and it's like people that drag me out of the house and string me up. But it has, it is the rhetoric of a lynch mob, and that's the metaphor they're using. And while she may not be personally committing violence or leading a violent crowd, it's certainly an incitement to others to infringe on our civil liberties, on our right to free speech, and clearly the agenda is to roll back the exemption rights for families all over the country. The last time this happened, it was in Disneyland. There was an outbreak of measles there. No one died. But that was used as an occasion for public health authorities. They were mobilized. They introduced bills in over a dozen states to restrict exemption rights and to remove the philosophical belief exemption. And in California, that bill was passed. And so 10% of the country now no longer has any right to an exemption. California has the most coercive vaccine mandates in the world. And that's a direct result of the last outbreak. What we believe in this here's an outbreak. They're clearly using it as an occasion to attack people on our side of the issue. There are people that agree with me. There are people that are, much more emphatic in their beliefs than me. But they're clearly attempting to mobilize the media, the press, to discredit a community, to discredit a point of view, to advocate censorship. Reduction of our rights, and it's that kind of occasion. So I think when a newspaper of the standing of the Boston Herald crosses a line like that, it's important to hold them accountable, because I don't think there's any way you can excuse that statement. And they should apologize. They should apologize to all of us. They should apologize to me. They should apologize to the Somali community that they're accusing of being, bumbling, uneducated victims. And they should apologize to the Vaccine Safety Council of Minnesota.